I welcome, first of all, I take great pleasure in chairing this session on the Chiefs of Defence Staff system. Really, why we put this as the first session was when I proposed this initiative to our Defence Secretary, he mentioned that first thing we should learn is the systems, whether Sri Lanka itself has adopted the proper system of Chief of Defence Staff. So therefore, to discuss this particular aspect with the experience of some of the countries who had been having these systems for a longer period. So that is why we included this as the first session of this dialogue. And I am happy that we have in this chair General Rashad Mahmood, the Chairman, Joint Chief Staff of Pakistan, General Zulkifeli for CDF of Malaysia, and Honorable Deputy Minister of Defense from Russia, Anatoly Antonov. Pardon me if I have not spelled your name correctly. Sri Lanka really was initially had an ad hoc system of joint operations because, as you all know, we faced a 30-year-long war. So to coordinate operations among the three services, there was the requirement of joint service headquarters or a joint operations headquarters. So initially, in late 1980s, Sri Lanka established joint operational headquarters. That is how the system came into being in Sri Lanka in late 80s. So we had a person called with 4 stars. We had a GOC, JOC. That is General Officer Commanding Joint Operation Command. So that was an ad hoc arrangement which was not an act passed by the Parliament at that time. But that system prevailed because there was the requirement to coordinate Army, Navy, Air Force and police efforts in combating terrorism. As you all know, we face a very strong terrorist organization for a long period. So that is how this system initially came into being. So thereafter, this JOC became JOH, like Joint Operation Headquarters. Likewise, it kept on changing, and finally, really towards the end of the war, really when we were almost winning only, this present government started writing and getting approval from the cabinet for a proper act which was passed in Parliament in 2009. So therefore, now in Sri Lanka, we have a Chief of Defence Staff Act, which is an authorized, legal authorized act which was passed in Parliament. So that is how, on that system, I am the 3rd CDS in Sri Lanka. We had 2 before. So I am the 3rd CDS of Sri Lanka on the new legal authorized CDS system in Sri Lanka. However, our original ad hoc system suited the requirement at that time, and we managed to defeat terrorism with that. So now in Sri Lanka we have a proper an act which spells out all the details of the responsibilities and vision and all that of the CDS in the Sri Lankan system. But I believe different countries, different scenarios, different situations, different sizes, different types of forces. So we all, especially in ASEAN countries, have different systems. Some call it CDS, some call it CDF, that is Chief of Defence Forces, and some call it Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff. Likewise, we have systems, especially according to the country's requirement which they have adopted. So in this session, we will listen to some of the systems, especially from Pakistan and Malaysian systems, and thereafter we open out for dialogue, and we individuals, other countries can talk about it, spell out the advantages, disadvantages, and why some other countries have adopted that system and what is the best system. So because Sri Lanka is also at the moment, though it's an approved act, trying to innovate and make a proper organization. Really we don't have though we have an act, We don't have a proper organization as of yet. We have branches like Directorate General of Doctrine and Training, we have Director Generals of Operations, we have Director Generals of Air Force and Navy Operations, we have Director Generals of Administration, Director Generals of Coordination. That's how my office functions as of today. But it is not an authorized organization. We are still experimenting this organization and trying to listen and learn from others also to finalize our organization. So with that introduction, I would like to open this forum to General Rashad, the Chairman, Joint Chief of Committee of Pakistan, to address all of you and talk about the Pakistan system. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, and gentlemen, good morning. I am indeed grateful to General Jayasuriya, Chief of Defence Staff, Sri Lankan Defence Forces, for affording me an opportunity to speak before this esteemed forum of South and Southeast Asian nations' defence chiefs dialogue on the concept of higher defence organization in Pakistan. Right from the outside, I want to clarify that in Pakistan we do not follow the Chief of Defence Staff system in its classical sense. We rather have Joint Chief of Staff Committee system, about which I shall dilate upon during the course of my talk. In our perspective, the aim of an effective higher defence organization is to plan, develop, integrate and direct employment of all elements of national power to ensure security and safeguard national sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity and interests, and when necessitated, guarantee effective supervision and conduct of war. The evolution of higher defence organization in most countries is largely governed by geopolitical and geostrategic considerations, which are guided by historical experiences of a nation. In some cases, evolution of higher defence organizations came about in a quest to harmonize resources, consolidate political control, and ensure optimal functioning of the military instruments. Domestic political system also, to a great extent, influenced the structure of higher defence organization. Likewise, in Pakistan, its military system is also in an evolutionary state based on its historical experience of military conflicts and political evolution in the country. The history of Pakistan's higher defence organization can be divided into pre- and post-1971 military conflict. Since Pakistan's independence in 1947 till 1971, Prime Minister of Pakistan himself held the defence portfolio. A defence committee of the cabinet, with a number of ministers as its members, was the supreme state body controlling all defence matters. At the services level, Air Force and Navy were under the Army. Inter-service matters and issues were handled by the Deputy Chiefs Organization, which was later redesignated at Joint Services Secretariat. When Pakistan Navy and Air Force acquired the status of independent services, a Joint Chiefs Committee was constituted, with the Army Chief acting as the modulator. It was the highest military body responsible for dealing with all inter-service matters related to policy, planning, and operational coordination. In 1951, the Joint Services Secretariat was reorganized into the Joint Chiefs Secretariat, comprising Chiefs of Army, Navy, and Air Force. Despite these frequent reorganizations, vital aspects of policy, strategic planning, and operational coordination did not receive the desired focus due to propensity of the services chiefs to remain engaged with the teething problems of their respective services. Thus, the country's defense policy mainly remained anchored on individual service employment strategies. Development priorities and operational plans were evolved in isolation without desired synergy. The Joint Chiefs Committee, served by Joint Chiefs Secretariat, remained concerned only with minor inter-service administrative matters. After the 1971 military conflict, a national commission was constituted to analyze the functioning of Pakistan's higher defense organization during the military conflict. The commission was also mandated to critically evaluate the political direction of the conflict, draw lessons, and recommend strategic direction for the future framework of Pakistan's higher defense organization. The Commission, through a lengthy process of intense deliberations, made some profound observations which served as the strategic guidelines for the subsequent formation of Pakistan's higher defense organization. The lessons were: a nation's desire for peace does not by itself constitute sufficient guarantees for peaceful existence. For as long as there are conflicts and disputes in the region, overt and covert threats to its sovereignty and independence will continue to exist, which cannot be ignored. National security is essentially the responsibility of the whole nation and not confined to defense forces of the country. Therefore, a comprehensive concept of national security needs to be evolved to meet the challenges of security and defense, both from internal and external threats. The evolution of national defense policy and its administration require effective political control for policy guidance and monitoring. As a corollary, national defense policy is no longer a military affair alone. Military strategy, if it is to succeed, needs to be integrated with political, diplomatic, and economic strategies reflecting the essential unity of defense policy. A number of institutions and agencies needs to be developed to produce the necessary data, appreciations, and guiding parameters to enable political decisions and for coherent implementation by the defense institutions. The Commission's recommendation necessitated a major overhaul of our higher defense organization, taking into account the major studies carried out, including a careful examination of higher defense organizations of a number of countries. In 1976, conversion of the Joint Chief Secretariat into a Joint Staff Headquarters with a full-time chairman marked the establishment of present higher defense organization for Pakistan. In evolving this institution, considerations were accorded to Commission's recommendations such as: the full combat power of available forces could only be developed in peace and decisively applied in war through a unified approach emanating from clearly defined national interest and cohesive national security and defense policies. Instead of mere coordination of single service plans, which often entailed uneasy compromises, there must be a jointly conceived and developed national defense plan. This required a permanent and cohesive higher organization of defense. It was argued that the coordination or unification which is brought about under the stress of an emergency becomes inoperative in times of peace. Similarly, attempts at coordination in actual conflict can be precarious unless the necessary infrastructure for coordination is established beforehand and essential procedures for joint actions are laid out in advance. Dynamism of regional and international environment, domestic socio-economic flux, and rapid developments in warfare associated technologies make it imperative that the national defense policy is viewed and practiced in a dynamic framework. Therefore, planning and practice of defense policies and strategies to remain relevant will necessitate continuous review of the conception and implementation processes. This could therefore only be done effectively by a permanent and a well-oiled inter-services institutions. Higher defense organization must therefore work to achieve singleness of conception and unity of efforts. Its policies must ensure synergy in development and implementation strategies for optimal utilization of available national resources. Its principal mandate includes to define from time to time the task of the armed forces of Pakistan in accordance with the national security and defense policies, to secure the necessary assessments and plans for the fulfillment of defense policy from the Chairman Joint Chief of Staff Committee. While periodically reviewing the structure and development of armed forces and associated organizations, the Defense Committee of the Cabinet also coordinates the matters of other ministries which have bearing on the country's defense potential. It will also supervise the conduct of war during hostilities. The Tier 3 is the Joint Chief of Staff Committee. As alluded to earlier, the Joint Chief of Staff Committee was established in 1976. Its composition is shown on the screen. I, being the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Committee, I have 3 services chief as its member, and the government is also represented through Secretary of Defense and Secretary of Defense Production, and my Director General Joint Staff Headquarters acts as the Secretary of this committee. The Joint Chief of Staff Committee is the highest military body for considering all issues related to the military aspects of the national defense. Joint Chief of Staff Committee meets every quarter or as on required basis. The chairman renders advice on military matters to the government in consultation with the services chief. The chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Committee is appointed for a period of 3 years and selected from any of the 3 services. By virtue of his appointment, he takes precedence over all other officers of the armed forces, irrespective of the seniority of the 3 services chiefs. The Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee is also the Deputy Chairman of the National Command Authority and heads the Development Control Committee of the National Command Authority. During war, Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee will take decisions as authorized by the Prime Minister and Minister of Defense for effective prosecution of war or conflict through activation of National Command Center. The principal charter of duties of the Chairman, Joint Chief of Staffs are: it acts as a principal advisor to government on all defense matters. It makes recommendations on preparedness of the armed forces, is responsible for conception, preparation, and implementation of military strategy issued through joint strategic directives. The Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee also makes recommendation on policy having a bearing on war potential and national defense. He also coordinates selection and acquisition of major weapon systems and equipments of 3 services for future induction and replacements for final approval by the government. He periodically reviews the role, size, and shape of the armed forces, solves inter-services logistic and administrative problems, and is also responsible to coordinate the budget proposals of the 3 services and recommend allocations to the Ministry of Defense. Joint Chief of Staff Committee has 8 standing subcommittees which meet once every quarter and prepare proposals in their respective fields for Joint Chief of Staff Committee. These are flashed on the screen. We have a Joint Operational Planning Committee, Joint Training Committee, Joint Logistic Planning Committee, Air Defense Committee, Joint Information Operations Committee, Joint Intelligence Committee, Joint Foreign Military Cooperation Committee, and Joint Staff Crisis Management Center. As far as role of the services chiefs of staff are concerned, the chief of staffs of Army, Navy, and Air Force are military advisors to the Prime Minister, the Defense Committee of the Cabinet, and the Defense Minister on respective services matters. They are responsible for the raising, training, administration, morale, and discipline of the forces under their command, and for the conduct of operations. Now, very briefly on the strategic planning process for policies, directives, and publications. The steps involved in the strategic planning process are indicated by the diagram shown, which I will explain one by one. The national security policy is conceived by the Department of National Security Advisor. It is approved by the Cabinet and the Parliament. It lays down national interest, aims, and objectives, and provides security guidelines to all elements of the national power, including Ministry of Defense, to secure national interest against external and internal threats and challenges. Defense policy is conceived and prepared at the Ministry of Defense, which provides guidelines to military strategy. It lays down the guiding parameters for development of the armed forces and helps to formulate an integrated strategy to employ the military instrument of all 3 services to achieve the objective set forth by the national security and defense policies. Defense policy concurrently provides specific guidance to other elements of national power, concerned with the security of the country. Defense policy thus becomes the guiding source for conception and implementation of military strategy by the Joint Staff Headquarters. Joint Staff Headquarters prepares joint strategic directives in the light of defense policy. Joint strategic directives, they lay down the military strategy for war, contingencies being planned, and broad strategic concept for the conduct of military operations by respective services for the attainment of the overall war objectives. Military strategy through joint strategic directive establishes the overall environment by drawing conclusions from the international, regional, and internal situation, overall threat to the national security, both internal and external, in the short and long-term perspective, nature and character of the war for which the military is to be developed, objectives to be achieved by the armed forces with or without active use of force, and gives a strategic concept for employment of armed forces. It also lays down the overall force level of the armed forces. It outlines the system for national mobilization for war and lays down guidelines for the defense production in the country. Defense policy paper and the joint strategic directives are issued during peacetime. In times of emergency, the Ministry of Defense issues a war directive based on which the Joint Staff Headquarters issues operational directives. Joint Staff publications are published at tri-service level by Joint Staff Headquarters, covering issues common to all services. These publications are revised from time to time in line with the prevalent doctrinal, operational, and training concepts of the Armed Forces of Pakistan. So far, Joint Staff Headquarters has issued 8 publications, which are flashed on the screen. The first is the Manual of Service Writing and the Staff Work, Manual of Land-Air Warfare, Manual of Sea-Air Warfare, Manual of Amphibious and Anti-Amphibious Operations, Manual of Abbreviations, Manual of Glossary of Terms, Manual of Armed Forces Symbols, and Voice Operating Procedures. Gentlemen, to conclude, Pakistan Higher Defense Organization has gone through a long evolutionary process, guided and influenced by the peculiar internal environment and historical experiences. Since concept of comprehensive national security is a dynamic reality, various elements of national power have been adjusting themselves with varying degree of success to cope with the range of national security challenges, both in traditional and non-traditional domains. Owing to peculiar political environment and wide range of internal and external challenges, Pakistan's Higher Defense Organization has evolved over time with an overarching paradigm based on consultative mechanism rather than exercise of absolute executive authority within the armed forces. However, as the democratic institutions are gaining strength and political control over all segments of the military instrument is also consolidating. This will make the role of Pakistan's higher defense organizations like Ministry of Defense and Joint Staff Headquarters more critical and responsive to steer the armed forces for optimal synergy within the overall ambit of political framework. While one country's model may not suit the other countries in totality, some features may be worth emulating to help achieve envisaged national security objective. I thank you very much for your attention.
We heard the Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee of Pakistan talking about the Pakistan system. So I think some of the audience might want to know who General Rashad is. To introduce Rashad, General Rashad, which I should have done before he went on to speak. He was commissioned in an infantry regiment in 1975. He's a graduate of Canadian Forces Command and Staff College and National Defense University, Islamabad. He holds a master's degree in war studies from National Defense University, Islamabad. His staff assignments include Brigade Major of an Infantry Brigade, Deputy Assistant Personal Secretary of Chief of Army Staff, Deputy Military Secretary to the President of Pakistan, and Chief of Staff in a co-headquarters. He remained in the faculty of Pakistan Military Academy, School of Infantry and Tactics, Command and Staff College, Quetta, and National Defense University, Islamabad. He has commanded 2 infantry regiments, 2 infantry brigades, and has the honor of commanding a multinational United Nations brigade in Democratic Republic of Congo. He commanded an infantry division and has also served as the Director General of Counter-Terrorism at the Directorate of General Inter-Services Intelligence. As a Lieutenant General, he commanded the corps at Lahore and also served as Chief of the General Staff of Pakistan Army. On 27 November 2013, he was promoted to the rank of General and was appointed as the Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, married and has a son and a daughter. Right, gentlemen, now next we will have the Malaysian CDF, they call it Chief of Defence Force, the system of Malaysia. Before that, I will introduce General Zulkifeli bin Mohammed Zin, the Chief of Defence Force of Malaysia. He is the presently the 18th Chief of Defence Force of Malaysia, effective from 15 June 2011, a long-serving CDF. Born in Pasir Mas, Kelantan on 14 June 1954, he was selected to undertake his officer's cadet training at the renowned Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, where he earned his commission in 1974. His parent unit was the 2nd Battalion Royal Malay Regiment, where he served as a platoon commander on 9th August 1974. His tour of the infantry saw him serving with various Royal Malay Regiment battalions, namely the 6th, 20th, 23rd Battalions, and finally commanding the 9th Battalion RMR Para from 1993 to 1995. He was the first commanding officer after the unit was redesignated as a parachute battalion. As an acknowledgement of his leadership acumen, General Zulkifeli was given command of the 8th Malaysian Infantry Brigade in Kelantan in 2002 with the rank of Brigadier General. Subsequently, he was entrusted with the command of the 3rd Division in Malacca from 1st September 2005 until 31st January 2007, thus earning him a promotion to Major General. He was then appointed as the Army Field Commander with the rank of Lieutenant General from 1st February 2007 until 1st June 2008. Apart from a wide command experience, General Zulkifeli has extensive exposure in staff and training appointments. His earlier extra-regimental employment saw him train subalterns as the Young Officers Combat School in 1981. In subsequent years, he became the directing staff at the Malaysian Armed Forces Staff College in 1997, before being appointed as the Commandant of the Army Combat Training Center in the same year. General Zulkifeli's staff experience include numerous staff appointments at the Army headquarters. He was appointed military assistant to the Minister of Defence from 1998 until 1999, after which he became the director of the Infantry Directorate from 1999 until 2000. He was then appointed as the Colonel Human Resource from 2001 until 2002, and then became the commander of the Reserve Service Division in 2002. He was selected to be the first commander of the International Monitoring Team Mindanao from 9th October 2004 to 31st October 2005. During his service, General Zulkifeli has attended several overseas courses and seminars, among the notable ones being the Support Weapons Course in India in 1978, RAOC Infantry in Australia in 1982. He was a graduate of the prestigious Royal Thai Army Command and General Staff College in Thailand in 1992, in which he was inducted into the International Hall of Fame in 2011. Apart from that, he is a graduate of the Malaysian Armed Forces Staff College in 1989 and the MA of Defence College in 1996. He obtained a Master's in National Resource Strategy from the internationally renowned National Defense University in Washington, USA in 2001. He was inducted into the NDU International Hall of Fame in 2011. He was conferred with an honorary doctorate in management from the University of Tun Abdul Razak on 4th November 2013. General Zulkifeli is married to Puan Sri Datin Sri Umi Khalsom. Pardon me if my pronunciation is wrong. And is blessed with 2 daughters. In addition, he is a keen golfer and enjoys reading in his leisure time. May I now request the Malaysian CDF to take the forum.
General Jagath, Jayasuriya, the Chief of the Defence Staff, Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Fellow speakers, General Rashad Mahmood, the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Committee, Pakistan, the Honorable Deputy Defense Minister of Russia, Mr. Anatoly Antonov, fellow CDFs, colleagues, and gentlemen, a very good morning. First of all, let me congratulate General Jayasuriya for organizing this ASEAN Defense Chiefs Dialogue, its inaugural session. I'm pleased to be here in this beautiful city of Colombo. I thank our host for the warm and kind hospitality that has been accorded to me and members of my delegation. And thank you, General Jayasuriya, once again for inviting me to speak. I believe that this dialogue would soon emerge as a top-level forum in this part of the world in future. Gentlemen, the establishment of a military force in any country is a vital step towards protecting its sovereignty. The presence of a body of men organized, trained, and prepared to protect citizenry remains the fundamental function of nationhood. In a larger sense, living in a world which is increasingly shrouded by vulnerabilities, uncertainties, complexities, and ambiguities, which I term as VUCA, the armed forces serve in an extended spectrum of responsibilities, not merely managing violence alone, but building peace and maintaining human security. As such, gentlemen, one could not imagine the complex organization, the vast body of expertise, and the wide range of assets that armed forces possess today. At the top of this elaborate organization is the defense chief, who is not only responsible for the command and control of this organization, but also accountable for the harmonious synchronization of the man, machine, and methods trilogy. Of late, he is also entrusted to bridge the gap between the armed forces and other military organizations in a multinational structure and afford a stronger collaboration in an interagency construct within the national government. My talk today will cover the following areas: brief overview of the Malaysian Armed Forces, the Higher Defense Organization, functions of the CDF, views on the function of the CDF. Let me give you a brief overview of the Malaysian Armed Forces. The Malaysian Armed Forces was established in 1933 as a colonial force through the formation of an experimental company of the Malay Regiment composed of 25 local recruits. This company expanded to 2 battalions on the onset of the Second World War, where they fought gallantly until the fall of Malaya on the 15th February of 1942. The Malay Regiment was re-established after the Second World War as the genesis of the Malaysian Army and eventually enlarged to include the Navy and the Air Force to face the threat of insurgency during the first and the second emergency, which lasted for about 40 years. As a result of the peace established after the end of the emergency, the Malaysian Armed Forces continued to develop from being a counter-insurgency force to a conventional force. It was involved actively in national development and nation building, while contributing significantly to the United Nations in the various peace support operations worldwide. Over and above developing its competency to defend the sovereignty, the Malaysian Armed Forces has established itself as a principal player in assisting civil authorities and undertaking humanitarian assistance and disaster relief efforts within and beyond our shores. In as far as relationship with other military forces, the Malaysian Armed Forces is a member of the Five Power Defence Arrangement, or the FPDA, together with Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. As Malaysia is a founder member of ASEAN, its armed forces has established strong multilateral ties with the military organizations of all member countries. Similarly, the Malaysian Armed Forces has strong relationships with many other armed forces outside the region. In recent times, the Malaysian Armed Forces has been preoccupied in providing assistance to the government in engaging transnational issues such as terrorism, piracy, human trafficking, and smuggling. The presence of the Malaysian Armed Forces was prominent in protecting Malaysian flagged vessels across the Gulf of Aden against Somali pirates. It was called again into action to contain the incursion by the non-state actor elements of the Royal Sultanate of Sulu Security Forces into eastern Sabah in early 2013, and was actively involved in the multinational search and rescue operations for the tragic Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 this year. Members of the force were also involved in the efforts to recover the remains of the victims and investigate the cause of the ill-stricken Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 in Ukraine on the 17th of July 2014. Let me elaborate on the higher defense organization. Gentlemen, as a military organization in a democracy, the Malaysian Armed Forces adhered religiously to the principle of being subservient to civil authorities while remaining strictly apolitical. In view of this key policy formulation and strategic command and control of the Malaysian Armed Forces is vested on the higher defense organization of the country. At the pinnacle of this structure is His Majesty the King, who is the Supreme Commander of the Malaysian Armed Forces and exercises his function on the advice of the Cabinet through the Minister of Defense. The next level in the hierarchy is the Malaysian Cabinet, being the highest executive body that controls the Malaysian Armed Forces. On the same score, the coordination for a whole-of-government approach is undertaken by the National Security Council, or the NSC, chaired by the Prime Minister. This council acts to synchronize the measures from all government agencies to afford comprehensive and holistic responses against non-traditional security challenges. In this sense, gentlemen, I sit as a member of the National Security Council, and I co-chair with the Inspector General of Police in the National Operations Planning Committee. under the National Security Council. Next is the Ministry of Defense. The Ministry of Defense functions as the executive arm for defense-related affairs and instructed to create a credible and versatile Malaysian armed forces, capable of defending the country and its interests. To effectuate this, both military and civilian components work hand in glove with the Secretary General as the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Defense. On the other hand, the military component is headed by the Chief of Defense Force, who is the principal military advisor to the Defense Minister and exercises full command and control of the Malaysian Armed Forces. The CDF is also jointly responsible with the Secretary General of the Ministry of Defense for the administration of the force in being. Gentlemen, the Malaysian Armed Forces structurally consists of the Malaysian Armed Forces Headquarters, the three services, namely the Malaysian Army, Royal Malaysian Navy, and the Royal Malaysian Air Force, the Defense Intelligence Staff Division, or the DISD, the Joint Force Headquarters, and the Inspectorate Division. The primary role of the Malaysian Armed Forces is to defend the nation's sovereignty, provide regional security, and protect national interests. On the same note, it is the Malaysian Armed Forces' secondary role is to assist civil authorities in the maintenance of public order and to provide assistance during national disaster, as well as humanitarian and disaster relief efforts internationally. In addition, the Malaysian Armed Forces is also entrusted with the task to contribute force for international peace support operations and other related missions alike. Functions of the CDF. As CDF, apart from command and control, I am also entrusted to ensure the preparedness and the development of the Malaysian Armed Forces. This does not only entail the development of tangible capacities, but include the enhancement of intangible strength, which will drive the organization to meet future challenges effectively. Over and above commanding the armed forces, the enhancement of multilateral and bilateral relationships with other military forces while facilitating strong interagency cooperation is one more of my responsibility. I'm also entrusted to assist the government in nation building through the various platforms established for this particular purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, to effectuate this end state, I am guided by the National Defense Policy and subsequently the National Military Strategy. On the other hand, the development of the Malaysian Armed Forces is stipulated and guided by our strategic development plan called the Fourth Dimension Malaysian Armed Forces. Similarly, to assist the government in engaging non-traditional security challenges, the various National Security Council instructions, or the NSC instructions, become the instruments to coordinate interagency responses. Another key area would be nation building, which is conducted through the programs of the National Blue Ocean Strategy. Views on the function of the CDF. Gentlemen, I'm certain that the function of the defense chief will be about similar with all military organizations. However, there are differences due to many factors such as the form of government, the geostrategic environment, and others. Therefore, I observe that on the current functions of the CDF will be as follows. Concerning security challenges, shifts in the geostrategic landscape have resulted in an increasingly blurring demarcation between traditional and non-traditional security challenges. While armed forces develop to face external threats, more often they are employed to undertake military operations other than war, or MOTWA, to engage non-traditional security challenges. In this sense, it is pertinent for a defense chief to render whatever assistance to civil authorities, yet to remain focused on the military's primary function. This would entail a strong understanding of the bigger picture while continuously retain awareness of the armed forces' core competence. Secondly, would be force development. The paradox between traditional and non-traditional security issues will provide challenges in effectuating force development in line with the organization's primary task. This would also include asset procurements. In this sense, it is imperative for the defense chief or the CDF to continuously reprioritize the armed forces wish list without losing focus in the core competence and primary functions of his organization. Thirdly, the conduct of military operations other than war. More and more, armed forces would have to conduct military operations other than war, or MOTWA, to assist civil authorities in engaging non-traditional security challenges. These challenges would have trans-border characteristics, granted the extensive reach of these threats and the contagion effect inherent in it. As such, the CDF should facilitate strong interagency and multinational cooperation. A case in point would be the establishment of the General Border Committee between Malaysia with both of our neighbors, namely Indonesia and Thailand. This committee would act to coordinate measures in engaging transnational crimes on both sides of the border. To effectuate the intent of the General Border Committees, high-level committees, or HLC, are established and jointly co-chaired by me with my counterparts from Thailand and Indonesia, respectively. The concerted responses and coordinated measures have resulted in a marked reduction in trans-border crimes. Fourthly, gentlemen, on military diplomacy. A very important tool in a chief of defense toolbox would be military diplomacy. The continuous changes in the geostrategic environment have resulted in an unprecedented contagion effect and increased interdependency in engaging security challenges. The hazards faced would require multinational responsive through close collaboration between governments, especially the armed forces. Any form of collaboration through diplomatic instruments, such as agreements or MOUs, would be akin a body without a soul. It would need a strong sense of camaraderie, firm friendship, and mutual understanding that will provide the spirit which will drive the collaboration. Hence, it is imperative that the Chief of Defense Force facilitate this environment of fellowship and brotherhood between his counterparts before it cascades down the chain of command. Gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to say that it is in my opinion that this inaugural South and South East Asia Defense Chief Dialogue 2014 is an important step towards effectuating shared awareness and closer cooperation. Granted the increasing interdependence between the two regions, I believe that the understanding and camaraderie established in this dialogue will cascade down the chain of command in our respective organizations and afford stronger cooperation in the future. Gentlemen, as Malaysia takes over the chair of ASEAN next year in 2015, I would like to say that international cooperation is about people relations. It is about building trust and finding common ground of comfort zone. It is also involve trust and sincerity. It is said that what is necessary for evil to thrive is for good men to do nothing. Trust me, gentlemen, we are the good guys. And if we choose to do nothing, then evil takes another step forward in triumph. Once again, thank you very much, and I wish you all a productive and successful dialogue. Thank you.
Please welcome the Deputy Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Mr. Anatoly Antonov.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, I am pleased to extend greetings and the best wishes from Army General Sergei Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. On behalf of the Russian delegation, I would like to thank the Sri Lankan Minister of Defense and Urban Development, and personally the Chief of Defense Staff of Sri Lanka, General Jagath, Jayasuriya, excuse me, maybe my wrong pronunciation, for great organization of this fora and your warm hospitality. The Asia-Pacific region, with the nations of South and Southeast Asia being its important integral part, is rapidly emerging as the leading center of global policy and economic growth. Russian priorities in the region are peace, stability, and security, without which sustainable development of all APR states is unthinkable. At the same time, one can witness attempts of some countries to adjust the APR development to their own so-called democratic standards by pumping in military contingents and imposing their values across the Asia-Pacific. This leads to growing insecurity of tomorrow, rising level of instability and unpredictability, enhance military capabilities, and strengthen military alliances. All of this is taking place against the background of significant shifts in international landscape as we bid farewell to illusions of the possibility to build a world with one center of power. At this critical moment, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has defined the primary mission of foreign policy of our country, building a brand new system of global consensus which will prevent conflicts from flaring up. There is a need for new security architecture based upon balance of interests and mutual guarantees, collective non-block grounds, equal and indivisible security, universally recognized norms of international law. In 2013, the 8th East Asian Summit approved the proposal put forward by Russia, China, and Brunei for a framework of principles on strengthening security cooperation in APR. Thereafter, Russia offered an action plan on shaping the new security architecture containing a provision on coordination of interaction and confidence-building measures in the military sphere. Regular meetings of top-ranking military officials of the region may serve the purpose as one form of this activity. That's why the Sri Lankan initiative to host the inaugurated South and Southeast Asian Nations Defense Chief Dialogue in Colombo is important and well-timed. Such meetings are useful and relevant. This world remains a safer place while ministers of defense convene at a negotiating table rather than stay at their national headquarters with their armies looking at each other through weapon sights. We expect these meetings to be regular and provide considerable impetus to cooperation among defense ministries of the region with a view to strengthening regional and global security. Mr. Chairman, despite the Asia-Pacific being relatively stable compared to other regions, there is still a lot of combustible material to fuel regional conflicts, territorial disputes, unsettled border claims, outbursts of armed confrontation. We attach great importance to the issue of denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and promotion of national reconciliation between North and South. We are concerned about the instability of some states of the region, which has the potential to spill over into Russia's bordering countries, primarily in Central Asia. Non-traditional security challenges, such as global terrorism, drug trafficking, piracy, and other kinds of organized crime, have found fertile soil in the Asia-Pacific. Mr. Chairman, the policy of the United States is another cause of concern. Under false pretenses, Americans are building up their military presence in APR, deploying nuclear-propelled carriers and long-range bombers. Attempts are being made to bring the nations of the region under the sway of the U.S. foreign policy. In this context, it is sufficient to mention the unprecedented pressure on the Asia-Pacific governments to join the illegitimate anti-Russian sanctions. Referring to the growing North Korean nuclear missile threat, Washington is vigorously drawing the countries of the region into the implementation of its plans for global missile defense deployment. The military capability that the United States is creating considerably exceeds the level of existing and potential missile threats. In fact, the United States global missile defense system is aimed at undermining regional and international security and poses a serious threat to the Asia-Pacific. In one of his recent speeches, the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, stressed that by interfering in other countries' internal affairs, the United States do not bring peace, nor do they have anything to do with promoting democracy. Just think about one thing. Over the last decades, the United States have triggered of 2/3 of all the armed conflicts. Just as it all happened in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. Military forces of the United States and NATO are moving closer and closer to Russia's doorstep. Former USSR space has now become a playground for the United States foreign policy. It is evidenced by the latest example when Ukraine was pushed into the abyss through the support of so-called Maidan and the unconstitutional coup. Legally elected president was ousted by force. Russia's fraternal, I would like to emphasize, fraternal country was pushed to the outbreak of the civil war. Thousands lost their lives. Today I would like to confirm that Russia is ready to assist peaceful settlement of the internal conflict in Ukraine. I would like to just only take 1 minute of your attention because there was a lot of questions to me in corridor regarding the situation in Ukraine. The way to which lies through a nationwide dialogue with the participation of all regions and political forces of the country. We stand for consistent implementation of the Minsk agreements on the ceasefire in the southeast of Ukraine. Mr. Chairman, we are concerned over the growing terrorist threats across the globe. Extremely disturbing is the trend according to which some countries support and encourage terrorist groups when it suits their needs. Eventually, these groups get out of their sponsors' control and act against them. Classic example: Taliban movement in Afghanistan, which had been set up to fight the USSR and later became the foundation for Al-Qaeda networking their cells through every region of the world. Later on, this experience was more or less replicated in Libya, Syria, and Iraq. The International Security Assistance Forces, during 10 years of their presence in Afghanistan, never managed to eradicate terrorism, and the drug threat has aggravated dramatically. What is the most alarming? The situation has immediate impact on our neighbors, particularly in Central Asia. The situation in the Middle East has become even more complicated. Disorganization Libya, strife-ridden Iraq, and war-ravaged Syria. As if all this was not enough, we now have the war with the Islamic State. It is known that this terrorist organization was once created, trained and armed with the purpose of overthrowing the legitimate Syrian government. Having gained battle experience and militants recruited from all over the world, this organization has embarked on building a quasi-state on the seized territory. We are worried that these failed experiments of flirting with terrorists never taught those playing these deadly games to be more prudent. In parallel with proclaiming worldwide mobilization against the Islamic State, new terrorist groups are being put together in order to fight Islamists in Syria and Iraq. Once again, we hear the idea of good and bad terrorists. We are confident that terrorists should remain outlawed, no matter what pretext they use. We have always assumed that the war on terror should rest upon the solid foundation of international law. In this context, we command the adoption of the United States Security Council resolutions on foreign terrorist fighters. We are calling upon the United States and their alliance to renounce double standards in countering the terrorist threat. We stand for coordinated actions in the combat against ISIL, involving all countries concerned, not only Iraqi government, but Syrian government as well. Russia is prepared for this kind of joint activity. Specifically, we provide support to legitimate governments of a number of states in their fight against religious extremists. Mr. Chairman, color revolution or color revolutions is yet another serious threat to peace and stability. In recent years, this phenomenon has become a significant destabilizing factor in many regions. Taking advantage of internal social economical difficulties, unsettled ethnic and religious conflicts, Western spin masters, under the banner of promoting democracy, fuel the flame of popular discontent with populist slogans and provoke eruption of mass protests, followed by overthrow of legitimate governments. Chow, blood. Advancing a pro-Western regime to power is the ultimate objective. Clearly, this creates an environment comfortable for terrorists. There are plenty of examples, from the Arab Spring to the color uprising in Transcaucasia and Central Asia. Recently, orchestrated protests in Hong Kong follow a pattern similar to so-called Maidan in Ukraine. This year, I brought up the issue of terrorism and color revolutions in Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, some of my foreign colleagues back then were telling me that these problems did not belong to Asia Pacific and Southeast Asia. Well, I'd like to caution them. A possible disaster is not stemming from another planet. Think of it. According to multiple reports, 10% of ISIL fighters have arrived in Iraq and Syria from Southeast Asia. Radical groups based in a number of countries in the region do not hide their sympathy to the idea of global jihad and create their own terrorist networks. What is going to happen to the region if and when those well-trained militants with huge combat experience return to their home countries? It means to our home. The explosive mixture of color revolutions, recipes plus terrorist cells can blow up the situation in this relatively quiet part of the world. Under these circumstances, the representative of defense ministries bear special responsibility for ensuring regional and global security. We stand for expansion of multifaceted military and military technical cooperation with the defense forces of South and Southeast Asia. As a positive example, I would like to mention the relationship the Russian Ministry of Defense has with the Ministry of Defense of Malaysia. After the disaster of the Malaysian Airlines plane in eastern Ukraine, the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, expressed deep condolences over the tragic loss of lives. Government agencies in Russian Federation were instructed to render all possible assistance in establishing true causes of this crash. We appreciate the partnership nature of our relations that was emphasized by the Minister of Defense of Malaysia, General Tun Hussein, during his meeting with the Russian Defense Minister, Army General Sergei Shoigu. The Russian side reiterated its readiness to provide any necessary support to investigation into the accident. Mr. Chairman, we highly value the work done under the chairmanship of Brunei in ADMM Plus in 2013. This baton was successfully taken by Myanmar, under whose chairmanship good groundwork was laid for the future. It is evidenced by the adopted action plans of all expert working groups. We hope that this high level of cooperation will be continued with Malaysia assuming the role of chair. Mr. Chairman, since 2012, the Russian Defense Ministry is hosting Moscow Conference on International Security. This fora has become a venue for discussion of the most pressing issues from the military perspective. The fourth conference is scheduled to be held in April 2014 in Moscow, where we'll address acute problems of regional and global stability. Officially, I would like to see you here, and we look forward to continue our discussion in Moscow. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I would like to make a few proposals for our future discussion as well for our future cooperation. Firstly, achieving greater mutual understanding and trust through regular contacts and dialogue, including the development of existing multilateral consultative mechanism in the APR. Today's meeting is a good example of such interaction. Secondly, promoting cooperation on the matters of transport safety, maritime security, peacekeeping, military medicine, combating terrorism and trans-border crime, as well as in other areas of mutual interests. Thirdly, development and implementation of joint measures on prevention of armed conflicts, gradual transition from crisis response mechanism to preventive diplomacy. Fourthly, ensuring transparency in military activity across the region in accordance with the universally recognized norms of international law, enhancement of mutual action predictability. Therefore, generated the atmosphere of security and cooperation in Asia requires our consistent joint effort and balanced decision making. We have achieved a lot, but there is much more to be done. Thank you very much for your attention. And Mr. Chairman, I just made the most important points of my speech, and I will convey to you the full text of my speech, and if anybody interests, you can use your possibility, or I can help you to distribute the full speech to my colleagues. Thank you very much, and dear colleagues, Mr. Chairman, from your permission, I'm ready to answer to a question possible raised after my conversation. Thank you.
人民解放军副总参谋长王宁，刚才安东诺夫副部长做了一个很好的关于地区问题的安全报告。
You said that I have no translation.
Yeah, I'm translating. I am Lieutenant General Wang Ning, Deputy Chief of General Staff of PLA. Just now we have witnessed the excellent speech delivered by Mr. Antonov, Deputy Minister of Defense from Russia, on the security issues at the level of the region or globally speaking.
当前我们地区面临的安全威胁，主要有传统安全威胁和非传统安全威胁，而且现在的发展形势来看，非传统安全威胁日益突出。我的问题就是，我们地区各国怎么样来在共同应对非传统安全威胁上加强呢情报信息的交流？怎么样建立呢跨地区、跨国家、跨军队的这个组织协调机制？怎么样呢提高我们共同联合应对的快速反应能力？谢谢。
And now I think the region is faced with both traditional and non-traditional security threats. And according to the current trend, we think the non-traditional security threats is becoming more highlighted. And I think I have three questions on this issue. First of all, how to further enhance our intelligence and information exchanges for regional countries on the issue of non-traditional security threats. And the second question is how to establish our mechanism in coordination and organization of transnational, trans-region and trans-military cooperation on the above-mentioned issues. And thirdly, how to establish our quick response capabilities while we jointly deal with the above security challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First question, of course, it's a very sensitive one. We understand that nobody who is here is ready to speak about intelligence loudly. Intelligence needs calm atmosphere, secret negotiations, and private agreements. So, having said this, I would like to emphasize the importance of exchange of intelligence information between ministries of defense. And as you know, that we have such agreements with various countries whose representatives are here. But we have to move very cautiously because to create multiple mechanisms of exchange of information will be very difficult. It seems to me, General, that we need more trust, more cooperation, more understanding, more dialogue before we decide to establish multilateral net exchange of sensitive or intelligence information. As to us, if you ask me, at this stage, we prefer to concentrate on bilateral ties, on bilateral relation in this sphere, and not to speak too much about it. As to the second question, you see that we have created a lot of mechanisms which could help us to promote peace, stability, and security. Today, we have to be very cautious as well, because we have to raise a question. If we decide to establish mechanism of dialogue, another one. What is added value of this new mechanism in comparison with the established mechanism and that are existing already? That's why my first point will be we have to think about the existing mechanism and to think how to improve them. And if we see any lack of coordination, any lack of information, any lack of cooperation, then we have to think about the creation of a new one. It's not the aim of anybody who is sitting here to create hundreds, tens of such mechanisms. We need to establish maybe one, maybe two, maybe three, but this mechanism should be effective. They should give you and me, your Ministry of Defense and mine, and we have to use the capability of such mechanism to strengthen the security of our nations. I mean, for example, China as well as Russian Federation. We have such cooperation, and you know that recently my minister has visited China, where we felt hospitality, warm greetings from senior leaders of China, and we made a next step forward regarding the cooperation in various spheres. As to quick response. Quick response is the answer to this question is coming from previous one. For example, today the conversation in the morning was excellent, it seems to me. We have enough time, it's very important. There was not lack of time. And everybody can raise any question that he wants about the military system in one state or another one. As I understand that at this stage, there is a lack of information regarding the military systems in various countries, and we need such conversation that General has started today in the morning. As I understand that the next step maybe will be the comparison of our philosophy, how we have to battle the problems which are facing and which we have to find, to which we have to find an answer. But a quick response, you see, it seems to me, or capability of a quick response are coming from the good, friendly relations between countries. If you trust one country or another one, you can rely on them. Then you can think about the possibility to make joint quick response forces, for example. As I know that our relations with China, for example, I don't want to offend anybody. My colleagues from China has raised this question. That's why I'm looking at him and trying to answer to his question, taking into account the current relations between China and Russia. We have a good, friendly relations. That's why for China and for Russia, it will be very easy to set up, for example, quick responses forces, which could be used in the interest of China and Russia. But I'm not sure today that everybody who is here, I mean, are ready to create such capabilities in the region. Maybe for the future, I hope that we need a few meetings and everybody will be satisfied with the bilateral relations, but it is for the future. Thank you. By the way, I bring a few copies of brochures, the results of our conversation in Moscow on regional and strategic stability, which, as I mentioned, we organized in Moscow, and next April will be the 4th conference. Mr. Chairman, if you permit us, we will put some booklets here, or maybe we will convey it to you, and if you permit us, we will distribute it during the coffee break. And another, you see that I have not mentioned, you see that there is another initiative of Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Army General Shoigu. We have decided to organize tank biathlon. Maybe you have heard about it. There is a competition between tanks and crew of tanks. and we already organized World Championship in Moscow last August. 13 countries participated in this competition. It was very interesting. There was necessity for crew to cover a special distance with the difficulties. It was necessary to fight special aims were introduced for crews. So you see that, of course, it's clear that Russia has won. It's clear, yes, because I offered everybody just only second place, because it's impossible to imagine that Russia could be the second or third when we organize such competition on Russian soil. But second place is free. If anybody from you decide to send the crew to Russia, you see that if anybody is interested, I'm ready to send an invitation on behalf of my minister to you in the future. I know that Malaysian minister has been invited already, as well as our Chinese colleagues and our Vietnamese colleagues were invited. And I hope, and China has participated already. I hope that your next result will be more better, and you will be more and more closer to Russian crew of tanks. No, first place is occupied. Mr. Chairman, if there is no any question, please, you see that if anybody would like to raise any question, including, for example, Ukrainian crisis, I'm ready to give an answer during the coffee break. It's up to you. I'm in your hands. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, that you have mentioned already that after this briefing, we will wait for you in a Russian destroyer, where we organize a small fouchette or reception. As I mentioned, there will be tea or what you want at the ship. I just would like to say you that there is just a coincidence that our destroyer has come when I come to Sri Lanka. There is nothing behind. There is no conspiracy with the Sri Lankan government. And moreover, we are not planning to deploy thousands or hundreds of our destroyers, submarines here. Just would like to show our capability, and I would like to confirm that we are ready to help all ministries of defense, all armed forces of the region to be more effective, to be strengthened, and Russian weapon is ready to be sent to your countries. We are at your disposal. Thank you very much for your attention.